welcome back to the 11 podcast. Stepping into the 11 with us this week, another member of our kind of mini Beastera series that we're doing here, Coach Leigh Howard. And Leigh, thank you so much for stepping into the podcast today. Really looking forward to kind of speaking to you. I know we've known each other for a long time, but I'm excited to kind of share your story with the audience and share your story with the people.
Awesome. I'm excited to be here. I know you in a variety of capacities now, so excited to dive in a little bit deeper into really all of them. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really interested in your story because I think you have such a unique path, which I love having people of all different kind of levels of the game and different experiences with the game on the show. And, in a very short amount of time as a young coach, you were able to achieve so much, and now you kind of find yourself in a different role, still very heavily involved with the game, but in a very different role than kind of where you started. I mean, I guess if we go back a little bit here, what was the game like for you growing up? Was it always something that you knew that you wanted to be a player and be a coach at the highest level possible? Like, was that just a goal from the early onset?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for saying going back a little bit. I've going back about 30 years, I think, since I first started with the game. Ever since I was a kid, my dad grew up playing soccer, played soccer at UConn, was drafted to the pros. So it was one of those things that was always ingrained in our family culture. Grew up going to his games, similar to a place like Afram's in Connecticut, where we were spending, doing our homework on the sidelines, spending late hours of the night watching him play with a lot of his teammates who were, for lack of a better way of saying it, like our extended family, uncles of sorts. So it's always been something that has really shaped who I am and shaped kind of the community in which I've built myself and my identity through. So when it came to really trying to figure out my next path in life, beyond college, beyond, the academic sphere, getting involved in coaching was a bit of a no-brainer. It shaped who I was. It shaped the relationships that I had built. And it was something that I really became dedicated to trying to instill that and provide that for others. And I think finding it in college coaching, it was relatively seamless coming into a spot where I was a grad assistant at my alma mater, but then trying to, like you said, kind of continue finding my way through the coaching world, the ladder, so to speak, to figure out what my path might be.
Yeah. And so if I have a prediction for this podcast, I imagine it's going to be somewhat along the lines of, because I know you pretty well, and I know often you're very modest when it comes to what you do. And so I think I'm going to make sure that I let the audience know what type of player and type of coach that you were. Because I think, we've talked about this before, where you went, Trinity, which is where you went on to be grad assistant, right, after you graduated. I mean, do you not set or hold program records in a slew of different categories, right? And Trinity, not to mention, as we've discussed as well, is a pretty high-level program and a pretty high-level Division III conference in terms of the country. So, as evident based on that, it probably seems as if maybe you could have played at a higher level had you wanted to. Was that at all part of the process for you when you were going to choose a college of, Division I versus Division III, or did Trinity just kind of feel like the perfect fit for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think throughout the process, and I think credit to a lot of the clubs around here, as well as, what we do with Beastera in terms of player education. There wasn't a lot of that when I was growing up. You're like, I'm going to go through this process. If people write me back, great. If they don't, not so great. I don't really know how to navigate through kind of the ups and downs of the recruiting process. That's become more and more evolved as we've evolved as a soccer community and as college athletics has grown. But I did do a handful of official visits at Division I schools. I had a few different offers at some of the local MAC Patriot League level type schools. And for me, it really came down to balance, came down to making sure that I was going to be in an atmosphere where I was challenged athletically, but I was also challenged academically. And then I was able to experience things beyond the playing field. It's funny you asked that. Piggybacking off of asking kind of what led me down this path, and the ability for me to go study abroad was a big piece of my decision. It wasn't something that was going to be afforded to me in a lot of the conversations I had at the Division I schools I was looking at, which is fair enough. When I became a coach at that level, I certainly understand the hesitation that coaches have in letting someone go for an entire off season. But at Trinity, it wasn't only an option, it was encouraged. I think over 60% of their students at the college in general go abroad. So I was able to do so in South Africa, in Cape Town more specifically, and studied there for 6 months, where I also worked for a nonprofit that was able to work on positive change through sport and soccer specifically. So for me, going through that process, to go back to your question, a lot of it was where can I get kind of the best of every world, and not lock down on one aspect of the experience, but really make sure I'm adding to my skill set and my character in every way possible. And for me, I felt as though Trinity was a great place to offer that opportunity.
And so how does that experience going to South Africa sort of shape or light the inspiration for coming back and then pursuing coaching at the next level once you graduate?
It played a huge role in where I decided to go next, how I decided to do it. It's one of my favorite things about you is the ability to go into a new space, to experience the sport that we love and we've grown up with in an entirely different way. And I certainly got that in South Africa. I think the biggest, I don't want to say light bulb moment, so to speak, but for me was like how much the game can impact people, whether you're seeking to play professionally or whether you're just seeking to find a safe space to be yourself and to get along with others. It's not the world's game. As cheesy as it sounds, it's not the world's game by mistake. It's something that connects people through different languages, through different socioeconomic backgrounds, through different career aspirations. And to see the way that kids who had next to nothing from a material standpoint and the way we as Americans see it, but felt like they had everything because they had the opportunity to play, just really said to me, like, wow, this is a sport that's changed your life and changed the lives of so many people. How incredible would it be to pursue a path in your next however many years that does just that? So it was pivotal in terms of my career path and where I wanted to take the next few years of my life.
Yeah. And I have to imagine even now hearing you talk sometimes about the current role that you're in and your current job, which I'm sure we'll get to and we'll dive in a lot deeper as we go here. I have to imagine there's a lot of the same feelings or a lot of similarities can be drawn from that experience to now and the way that you get to work with athletes and provide them an opportunity to experience the sport in such a unique way and see the way that it impacts their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, again, sport's something that, at least for me, I grew up doing each and every day. And every once in a while you take a pause and you say, why am I doing this? Or someone asks you, why do you do this? Why do you put so many hours into it? And for that to be something that I've had the pleasure and really the privilege of reassessing each and every time I've brought the game into a new sphere or a new path, I've been really fortunate to be able to reflect in that way, whether it's through changing careers or going abroad or spending a summer in Nicaragua working with soccer or with girls through the game. It's just being able to constantly reassess how is this serving me and how am I using it to serve others, which has been really rewarding and remarkable in terms of the way that the game's impacted my life for so long.
Yeah. if we dive even a little bit deeper into kind of what your current role is and some of the amazing things you've been able to do. I mean, I know we were just talking the other day, right? You were just in Washington, D.C. speaking to senators and everything like that. I mean, what kind of, I guess maybe the question would be, what is kind of the program that you work and what kind of impact is it making on some of these student athletes?
Sure. So, as we kind of alluded to, I was a college soccer coach for 10 years.
Hmm.
Recently, 2 years ago, pivoted a bit, a really big bit, and took a directing role at Special Olympics for a program called Unified Sports.
Hmm.
So essentially what the program does is it brings together athletes with intellectual disabilities and partners without, so neurotypical general education students, on the same playing field, in the same physical education classroom, on the bowling lanes, leadership conferences. So it really tries to use sports, of a variety of sports, to create social inclusion and to positively affect climates within school districts, whether it's our young athletes program, ages 2 to 7, something in middle school intramurals, or in an interscholastic way at the high school level.
Hmm.
So I work with, right now, give or take 90 schools who implement the
Wow.
program throughout the state of New York, and looking to just build in terms of how many people we can impact and how deep of an impact we can make.
Yeah. If maybe even we talk about that pivot that you mentioned, what things have college coaching kind of set you up for success in terms of coming in to this role?
That's a great question. It's one I had to answer on my interview. It's one I had to kind of make up as I went to see. But it was a really cool experience to look back on 10 years of coaching, where, again, similar to when you're a player, you're just kind of going through it. And you're like,
Yep.
why wouldn't I keep going to the next level?
Yeah.
And why wouldn't I keep uh, taking the next step in the ladder?
Yeah.
And then when you pivot completely, you're like, okay, I've been a soccer coach. What can I do?
Yeah.
um, I think coaching really prepares you in a lot of ways to, you're directing constantly. You're always providing feedback, providing information to small groups of people, to larger groups of people. You're collaborating with your peers on different ways that you can, whether it's the tactical aspects of the game, whether it's team management, or game preparation. So you're collaborating, you're recruiting. So you're always finding ways really to sell your program, to sell yourself to prospective student athletes. So a lot of what I did in coaching really does directly relate to the ability to communicate with athletic directors, superintendents, congressmen now, and that's the list, about what it is we do and how valuable it is.
Hmm.
And then some other aspects of just the management and the relationship building with people. So, as I built relationships with staff members all across the universities in which I worked, as well as the players, that's what we're doing, or I'm doing every day. It's connecting with the teachers, the coaches, the ones implementing the programs in their spaces,
Yep.
and then finding ways to help elevate and empower those athletes that we work with, help really showcase their talents, their abilities, in a world where they've mostly been seen for what they can't do. It's really taking a look at what they can do. So yeah, I mean, it translates way better than I thought it would, and it's also, to all the aspiring or current coaches out there, it's really cool to see some of the things that we take for granted as coaches: communication,
Yep.
direction, delegation, as skills rather than just they're skills I've taken for granted. And so it's nice to see them translate well into a different space.
Yeah. I think it's definitely an interesting thing that I'm navigating currently in kind of, I guess, recognizing what actually is applicable from my playing and coaching career, what does translate to the real world, because I think there are so many things like you mentioned there. There's relationship building, there's giving feedback, there's receiving feedback. I think a lot of people that aren't in athletics maybe struggle with that. They don't they can't really I'm sure you and I both can attest to, there's been a lot of times when we've been given very harsh critical feedback in a very direct and immediate way. And you have to be able to take that on board and decide how you're going to react to that. And I think there's a lot of people that maybe are outside of sport or team sport environments that aren't equipped to deal with that when it comes their way. I do also wonder sometimes too, and maybe this is even what we can talk about too when you talk about the climbing of the ladder of that coaching ladder, and kind of it's always like a spinning wheel, so to speak. I do wonder, what are the things from playing or coaching that maybe aren't so applicable to the transition, because I think there are a lot of differences in, now coming into a real world, quote unquote, type environment or office type environment. You're like, okay, communication's a little bit different than what I'm used to. All right, how do we adjust to this? How do we adjust to that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you get a lot less free gear. That's all I'm going to say
Yep.
about that. But there are definitely some perks of coaching that you miss. The free boots, the copious amount of equipment that you're getting, kind of ad nauseum. But I would say like the pressure, is completely different. The work-life balance is completely different. Some of the things that you get so ingrained with, either climbing the ladder or in coaching, even if you're not trying to climb anywhere, but you're trying to, prepare your team to be as competitive and as successful as possible. The way in which we define success in college athletics is so, it magnifies certain things significantly more than others.
Yeah.
Those are results, those are statistics. Those are things that, out there on paper are a little bit more black and white, a little more cut and dry. When we all know as coaches, there's so many things that go into every season. There's injuries, there's preparation, there's these days, the transfer portal, there's COVID. There's all sorts of different elements. There's the scheduling piece. What does your non-conference schedule look like in terms of how it prepares you for having success in conference? Did it build your confidence, or did you play some of the toughest competition around? And yeah, you got great experience, but you didn't get a win under your belt before heading into the season. There's so many things you can't plan for, yet you're measured in this way on a public stage, whether it's parents of the program, whether it's your peers within your university, or the greater soccer football community of, how's this team doing this year? And I think that coming into this role, and there's different pressures, you're dealing with people that are probably experiencing very different obstacles in their life than Division I athletes that I've worked with for 10 plus years. But I think being able to come into a space where my perspective has completely changed has been a really healthy experience for me.
Yeah.
I was finding myself in the last years of college coaching, you're complaining about like the shade of yellow that's on the jersey versus, or certain parts of the field not being cleaned up in the way they should. And nowadays I've had to completely take a step back in terms of what I think is important or what I think is going to matter at a certain event or a certain workshop that I'm running. Because it's not, you come back to the realization that it's not about me or how I'm being measured, but how these athletes or these students or these participants are experiencing success and are allowed to be in a space where they fail and they make mistakes, but then they learn from them.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that fully answers your question, but I think that some aspects of coaching and the bubble that you're in don't always translate to like what's going on outside of that world, for better or for worse. I think that I miss a little bit of that competitiveness that you have and the under the lights feeling of saying, this is it. This is, how my next 3 months are going to be defined by this one game that I'm not even playing in. So you miss that, but I also think for me personally, it's been a great reframing of what I spoke about earlier, why I do it,
Yeah.
and what drives me through the game of soccer or football.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think you kind of answered my next question, but I'm wondering if that constant measuring of success, right? That constant, whether it's each and every game or on a season, have you climbed the ladder? Have you gotten your team better? Have you taken on a better job? Have there's so many things, again, like we talk about when in the kind of the coaching community, everything is about how do I get to the next thing. And so I wonder too if that was maybe a real driving factor in kind of taking a transition away from it for a little while and stepping back, because that metric of success, constantly having to try and meet that bar, can really cause you to burn out if you don't really be mindful of it. I know I definitely had the same exact thing when it came to playing. It was like the moment I got somewhere, I was like, okay, how do I get to the next thing? And eventually you take a step back and you realize, wait a second, I'm not even living in the moment. I'm not even experiencing what I'm in right now because I'm thinking, how do I get to the next thing?
Mm-hmm.
Was that part of the coaching career, maybe realization towards, near the end of the college phase?
100%. I think that it was really difficult for me. I won't speak on behalf of all the coaches in the world, but it was really hard for me to not lose myself in the expectations of others.
Mm-hmm.
As you said, whether it's game to game, season to season results, expectations, or your job as a whole. I was fortunate enough to, within 10 years, be the assistant at a Division III level, be the assistant at a fantastic Division I program in Bucknell University with a coach who taught me so much. I wish I knew how much she taught me about life while I was there,
Mm-hmm.
and really listened and absorbed the way I do now with her. But then to jump and be a Division I head coach at Marist, and then obviously make the move up to Albany. And really, so many of those decisions were defined by what other people told me was the next best move.
Yep.
It's not like, and I won't pretend to be super well versed in the field of law, but it's not like you go to law school, you become a paralegal, you take the bar, you become a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this, I don't even know if that's the trajectory, but it's a little bit more streamlined. You could be Division I, you could be Division III, you could be, a national champ in Division II. You could pivot completely and go to club. There are so many different spheres under the coaching umbrella.
Yeah.
And I think everyone, it's such a tight and supportive community, but it's also a community in which everyone's got an idea of what your next step should be.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't take any of those steps that I made back, but I would say that I lost a little bit of who I was and why the game's so important to me while you're looking for the bigger conference, more scholarships, bigger facilities, better facilities, and you end up in places where you're like, wow, I chose this Division III school at the start of this whole process so that I had my academics, I had my athletics, and I had that social, that cultural aspect to my experience. And I was blinded, I think, or at least guided away from that. And yeah, to your point, I think that you do lose sight a little bit when you're hearing all of the ways people think about you, or the ways you could be better, or you should be better, or you are better than where you're at, instead of just soaking in where you are. I mean,
Yeah.
4 different places in 10 years, you're really just catching your breath and settling down before you're on to the next thing. And being able to be in a new position and be like, I'm here Monday through Friday, occasional weekends, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm also re-experiencing how to find myself in what I like to do, who I like to be, without looking towards that next opportunity or the next place I'm going to move to.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because too, again, if we, and I don't think it should be understated as well. Like, part of it, like you say, part of it is maybe being shaped by kind of what the outside perspective is giving you, right? And especially like when you are going along this sort of coaching ladder, it's like, okay, I'm a Division I assistant at a really high level program that's doing well. And then, you're able to, which, is you're in rare company in terms of being able to be a Division I head coach at such a young age. And now I've done it at 2 different programs. So I wonder too, if part of it is like, even if things aren't quite feeling right, it's like, well, I'm kind of checking the boxes, right? Like I'm doing the things, I'm taking the next steps. I'm good at this, because I mean, especially as someone that was an assistant for you as well, I can attest to this. You are good at it. So it's like, I wonder too if there's a part of you where it's like, okay, well, even if it's not feeling perfect, I'm good at it. So maybe should I, should I climb the next rung?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's you're good at it. Sure, that's everyone's got their own perspective on that, but you're good at it. You love it, and it's all you've known to a degree. And I think stepping outside of that world and reshaping it a bit is really scary. It's something that, when you're caught up in it, you're always looking forward. You're not necessarily looking down at your feet. You're not looking around. You're not often looking inward. And I think that, for a variety of reasons, that's something that I was able to do, and said, I can still be part of this game, impact people's lives, develop players and people, and do it in a space that makes more sense for me right now. Because it is, a constant carousel of you thinking about what's next, and you saying, well, I want to be more successful. And I think every program's success is defined so differently. Just like the players we work with at Bistera, some are aspiring to be professional soccer players, some are aspiring to make their varsity team, and some are just trying out the sport, and they're like, maybe I'll like this more than basketball or more than football. And so I think it's very easy to get caught up in what success means, because other people are defining that for you, instead of you really staying true to your program, the players currently within it, and yourself and what your values are in terms of success in the classroom, in the locker room, on the field. It's not just black and white. It's not just X's and O's. Some programs are really well equipped to win a conference. When I was at Marist, we had 8 scholarships out of 14, and we're competing against players or programs that had 14.
Yeah.
So their barometer for success is going to be different than ours might be. And sure, in any given year, especially with the institution that it is, you expect to be vying for a championship and part of the conversation. But the reality of each school in that conference, and in many conferences, is very, very different.
Yeah.
And so maintaining that your wits about you in that environment, I think, is a difficult thing for coaches to do. And certainly was a difficult thing for me to do, without thinking maybe I can go to the next spot and win there, or that'll propel me to be there, instead of just being the best of where I was.
Yeah. We keep kind of shading in the answer to this next question here. As even you mentioned there, not all college programs are created equal. And that's even within, the same divisions. As you mentioned there, there's very different scholarships. There's very different funding. There's very different, even too, we take away the athletic piece. There's very different academic scholarships. There's very different financial aid. There's different academic programs. There's just, the list goes on. And I think as young players coming up, there's maybe less so of a knowledge of that. There's less understanding of, oh, wow, okay, this one program is better, not necessarily because the team is better or the coach is better, but simply because, they can get 80% of their team in for next to nothing, right? And like, just things like that, as you become more ingrained in the game, you start to learn these types of things. And, even as we mentioned too, kind of the pressures and the expectations on a coach throughout the season, throughout their career, it can be daunting. But I'm wondering if you can maybe even shed any light on any additional things, maybe, or maybe it's kind of the same things we've highlighted here, about what is it that players maybe, or even parents people that look at college soccer, what are some of the things that they don't quite understand that it really takes to be a head college coach? Because you know it better than most, and I think sometimes there's a bit of a misconception about what's required or what goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. I think it's a loaded question that can go in a variety of ways.
Yeah.
But I think most specifically, it's like the vast majority of coaches are in it because they love the sport and they love what the sport could do for other people.
Mm-hmm.
They might love the competitive nature. They might love the relationship building. They might sink totally into the X's and O's and love problem solving and watching film. That was not for me. But everyone's got their reason to love it, or their method in which they really thrive in helping instill that love in others. And that's what they want to get out of that's what they want their players to get out of the experience. Like they want other people to love it and to grow and to have success. And at the same time as you're trying to develop people as players individually, you also have a job to answer to. You have bills to pay, you
Yep.
have a salary to make, and your success is defined by whether you win, whether you lose, where you end up in the standings. So at the end of the day, you're having to take relationships that you're building with various players to make them better people, make them better players, but also to win games. And so sometimes the growth of one player might not still fit into the puzzle of the team at that given moment or that given season. And I think that for players to recognize when you're within a college program, you're one of 30, give or take.
Mm-hmm.
When you're seeking out to be part of that program, you're one of hundreds.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you're looking to be a college athlete, you're one of thousands. So really being able to look outward to, yes, see what's around you, but also look inward to see how you impact every situation, including whether or not you choose to go to that school, is so important. Because I think a lot of players feel the pressure of playing from parents, from friends, from social media.
Mm-hmm.
They feel the pressure of being the one to get the stats, to be on, the Instagram of their college team. And this is a long-winded way of kind of saying that I think they need to realize they're not the only ones
Mm-hmm.
doing that. When I was at Bucknell, there was one weekend where we had 846 players reach out to us to have us see them play. And one weekend in New Jersey for one program. And so I think, when I talk to prospective student athletes or recruits and I tell them that, they're like, no way. I'm like, yeah, you're one of 846 players just this weekend that want to potentially go here. So I think coaches are always trying to assess the best fit to get them to win games, in terms of the 11 on the field, and then the best 30 or so people to make their program, and really their extended family that much stronger, that much better, that much more successful and well-rounded. So I don't know if that's specific enough for you, but I think really having this understanding heading in that you're doing all of these things to make yourself the best prospect, the best player possible, but so are a lot of other people. And it's a coach's job to piece together those puzzles in a way that makes the team successful and makes them successful in their profession. So I think that the job of a coach at the collegiate level is very all-encompassing. You're dealing with recruiting, you're dealing with tactics, you're dealing with management of people and of players. You're dealing with fundraising, you're dealing with appeasing alums. Like there's a lot of elements to it. And the players are one very, very important piece of it, but one of many different things that a head coach has to juggle, making decisions and moving forward.
Yeah, and again, the thing I always like to kind of highlight too is it's not necessarily just people, right? It's 18, 19, and 20-year-olds. And, I'm sure there's a lot of them out there that are listening right now. And the reality is it, you are a little bit emotional, a little bit irrational at certain points at that age. And it's a hard, I know it's been joked about by different college coaches that I've come across. It's like, sometimes isn't it crazy that our job or our salary, the way we put a roof over our head, all comes down to, the decision that this 19-year-old kid is going to make, or that this 18-year-old student athlete is going to make. And it's a lot of pressure. And we know that student athletes are sometimes going to make mistakes. And so where I guess I'm going with this sort of train of thought here is that I think it'd be hard for us to say that student athletes need to have more empathy for their coaches, right? I know that that's a very hard ask, but I oftentimes found, whether it was while I was a player or whether when I was a coach, I would hear players say things like, my coach just hates me. I don't know why my coach hates me. And the more I got down the road, I started to realize, I was like, there's next to no chance that your coach actually hates you. Because, like you said, the vast majority of coaches out there are in it because they love the game, they love to compete, and they love to help athletes experience that same emotion with them and use soccer as a vehicle to get them to the next stage of their life, right? That's what everyone's trying to do. All while at the same time trying to answer to their athletic department, answer to the boosters, answer to this, that, and the other, and keep a little bit of job security and, be able to answer to their family. So if you think that they have the time and energy and, emotional bandwidth to be like, you know what, this 18-year-old kid, I hate him or her. It just, I can't really fathom that it's true. It probably is just manifesting in a way that they're trying to do what's best for the group, what's best for the team. And sometimes that may look not exactly the way that you were hoping for in terms of that interaction between player and coach. I hope I'm kind of characterizing that correctly, but maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like the reality of it is it all boils down to like we're all humans trying to achieve things because we're passionate about it, because we've worked at it, because we want to have success. We want to make ourselves, our family, our team, our community proud. And as much as, players are going to falter, whether it's the age, whether it's the nature of sport and competition, not everyone's going to have success across the board. So are coaches, and I think that that's one of the things that I really tried to embody in coaching, and is also hard because it can so easily become inhumane in the way that you treat or you see coaches from afar.
Yeah.
But was, if I didn't know the answer to a question, don't pretend like you know the answer. If one of my assistants or the men's coach or one of my peers even might know the answer better than me, let's tap into that and let's use the resources we have. Or I might make a mistake that leads us to a loss or that frustrates people in the training environment. And if I'm confronted with that, I appreciate the inquiry or the curiosity behind those decisions and try to meet that with a collaborative mindset as much as I can or could, as the head coach. But I think it's a tough balance to play because you're trying to be this authoritative figure, but you're also a person, and you're also someone who is going to make mistakes in the lineup, is going to get emotional after big games or big losses, is going to have the wrong tone in a halftime speech or post-game speech where you're trying to figure out, do I lift the group up or do I lay into them a bit to really spark that fire? And sometimes it hits and sometimes it doesn't, across 10 years and, however many games a season, 16, 18 games a season. It's crazy how you forget that quickly. But there are going to be moments where you make mistakes too. And I think one of the harder things as a coach, at least for me, was I'm a people pleaser. I do it because of the people, not because of the tactics. I know I've said that enough. But to have, people either in the stands across the way, at home, on Twitter, like all the different spaces now where you can put your opinions
Yep.
in a way that doesn't necessarily have to be responded to, or is even you're able to respond to. It's hard because you're making decisions that you think are the best thing. And even if they're not, and you want to own that they're not, you don't always have the ability to do that. And you just have to kind of swallow it a bit as a coach. It's one of the lonelier positions when you're, on the bus ride back from a tough loss, 3.5 hours away, and the team's starting to at least get out of the, have the upswing of the trip, because they're able to chat together, and you're sitting there and you're like, I don't have that community, and I'm sitting with this right now. So yeah, I think that, to many of your points, it's a tough space to be in at times because your ability to make mistakes feels lessened, at least, in certain moments.
Yeah. You feel, you're under the microscope a lot, and everyone's watching every single decision that you make. And, I can appreciate you speaking about the idea of the loneliness, because I even look at sort of my assistant coaching career, right? And I've worked for 3 different head coaches now at 3 different levels, and all 3 of them are no longer in college coaching. And I think part of it is because kind of what you're talking about, this idea of the human and people aspect of being a coach. All 3 of the coaches that I've worked for loved the relationship building part, loved building relationships with the players and the staff. And I think where, being a head coach sort of almost stifles that to an extent, because I remember speaking to you about this kind of after your time at UAlbany. I remember really being able to empathize at that point of my career when I was working with you, and being like, I kind of get, as an assistant, I kind of have my sort of comrades, right? Where I can go speak to Matt or Cece. We're kind of on the same, right, in the same boat, so to speak, right? And the players all have each other. They go through the same things. We know what it's like to be a player, and sometimes you say good things or bad things about the coach, and you can bond together over that, right? And then so it's like the head coach, you have this relationship with the players that's very much like, I'm the coach, I'm making the decisions that affect you. And even to an extent with your assistants on your staff, it's like, I hired you, I'm your boss, like I'm going to tell you what to do. And then again, like it's almost like the only kind of people that are going in the same boat as you is head coaches from the other sports, or like the men's coach, but then again, that's a completely different sport, kind of completely different community. So you almost look around and you're like, where are the head coaches people? Like I think you have to be a very independent and driven person to be a really high level successful head coach, because you might look around sometimes and be like, all right, it's me, I'm making the call, and it's going to fall back on me, however it goes, positive or negative.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that some of it is just being really good. And as I said, my boss at Bucknell was just so good at having, whether it was her family or her hobbies outside of coaching, like being grounded and being balanced in what the team, what the sport, what the relationships with her staff and the Bucknell community meant, but also what she was outside of it. And I think it becomes hard. It is a position that's round the clock, that your phone's always on. You're kind of glued in a lot of different ways, whether it's recruits, whether it's players, whether it's, your peers, other games that you have to watch, even though you're not playing that day. And I think that, I give a lot of credit to, and I have a lot of admiration for coaches who have that balance and are able to really be diligent in the way that they devote their time and their passion to the program, and also understand that it's not the only the only thing they had, the only way to identify themselves, the only way to gain satisfaction. And I think for me, that was really hard. That was really hard. And it was something that I've worked a lot, especially the last couple of years, in really completely changing the identity and kind of going through what a lot of players go through after they stop playing. I skipped that and I stayed in the college or the college realm as well as the soccer realm. And it's been really hard and cool and all the things to understand who I am with the sport, still playing, on a weekly basis, still coaching with all of you guys and learning and growing in that still. And then also offering sports in a completely different capacity here at Special Olympics. So I don't know. I find myself just like really lucky to have been through the journey, even though it's here and then here and then here, it's such a journey. And if you don't learn from each step on the way of it, then you're really missing out on what I feel is like the most important parts of life.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so non-linear at all, especially when you're going through a big transition like that, which, I mean, I guess I have to ask, I think we've really kind of set it up to really understand sort of now the position that you're in and being able to have a more holistic approach to the game in the sense of it fulfills you and also allows you the space to create your own identity outside of it. Whereas maybe college coaching at times, it becomes so all consuming and doesn't allow for that sense of identity outside of the game. But when you actually kind of have that moment at the end of UAlbany, I guess sort of where the rubber meets the road, so to speak, is there, I mean, what is that like? What are those emotions like of because I know as we mentioned here, it makes sense to go and take this next step. This is the right step for you. But also, and this is probably even me asking from myself, from my own personal perspective, it's like, I know this might be the right decision for me to make in terms of what's next, but it is also really hard to make this decision.
Honestly, it was just exciting for me. I think that soccer is a game and the coaching community is a community in which you can always find a spot in it again, find love in it again, have that community to fall back on. And I don't mean that in a step down way, but you can if you're ever feeling as though you want to get back into it, it's there. And I think to say, I know what this looks like. I know what this feels like. I've done it. Now I want to see where I could go with something totally different. It's exciting. It's new community. It's a new way to challenge yourself to impact others. It's self-growth, I think, in what can I do within my job? What can I do outside of my job? I love making new friends, getting in new environments. And I think that this switch has done nothing but open my eyes to things that, one, holding on to things that still really matter to me and knowing how those things can move through, whether it's things, whether it's people, whether it's character traits, etc. Know how those can continue to follow me through life, regardless of the community I'm in. Or two, learning new things about myself and learning new people, getting into worlds that even though it's still in Albany and I'm still right here, 10 minutes from where I was in my last job, I've met a completely different subset of people and experienced or gotten to learn about their experience through life. And I think that piece I was really, really excited for. And it's been nothing short of my expectations. If anything, I've become a lot more excited by some of the interactions I can have and some of the ways that, whether it's public speaking, whether it's passion, like I can divert my skills into a new space. So yeah, I mean, honestly, I think the biggest thing was just trying to figure out where soccer would fit in.
Yeah.
I knew I would still stay on with Beastera and have a great relationship with both, their owners as well as the rest of our staff. But also, would I still want to play? Would I still be able to be a part of the community of college coaches that I have spent so long becoming friends with? And, you realize pretty quickly who's going to be there and who is a friend beyond that. And maybe through that, but beyond it as well.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a long answer.
No, I can relate to so much of that. I think that's a huge thing is then, like, because we talk about this idea of like kind of eras or chapters, right? And you get to take this on this new era and this new chapter. And part of that, I think, is like you said, it's identifying, okay, how does soccer fit into this new era for me? Because I definitely want it to be different than the past era. And I think, all of us kind of balance the different levels of that. And we go, I know for me personally, I'm like, I wonder, do I just need to like take a year and just not even look at a ball? Like, is that sort of the solution that I need to have? And then figure out a way to sort of filter it back into my life. And I think, I don't know if maybe some people need that drastic of a change and then to be able to figure it out depending on what your kind of last era ends. But I think the way you're doing it in which you're like, I know that I still want it to be a part of my life, but I just want it to be a part of my life in a different way. And I get to control more of how it's in my life, I think is the best way to do it and allows you that space like we've been talking about all day here today to go into this new era and experience it for all that it is.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, not just because we work together through Beastera, but I think the Beastera community has been a huge asset to that transition. I think one of the best things about the group is that everyone's background's a little bit different and everyone's experiences as not just a player, but a coach is different. Everyone's skill set is a little bit different and tone a little bit different. And I love the fact that I can learn off of each one of the staff members something different and embrace the fact that some of the best coaches we have were never in the college game at all, and yes, when we talk about the ladder, we get defined by like, oh, the Power Five must be the best coaches.
Yep.
And then it's the mid-majors. And then maybe it's the Division II coaches. And then it's Division III. And then it's Community Cup, so on and so forth. When, you learn through our group as well as, we're not unique in that sense. But you learn that there's just so many different circumstances that go into why coaches are where they are, why they seek out different pathways, whether it's, supplemental training, private training, club training, the college level. It's been really refreshing to be in an environment where that pathway isn't judged, that pathway doesn't define your success. What defines your success is your demeanor, your approach to coaching, your ability to learn, your wants to make our community better players and better people. And so I think, when you said like, I think you're doing it the right way, like that to me is the right way, is finding people that aren't going to define you by your success, by where you've been, but where you currently are and the impact you're having on, the group of players that you're working with.
Yeah, exactly. I think it is definitely something that's very unique about Beastera and, because sort of on paper, you would imagine coaches that are working with players who have never played the game before, right? Or very young players. There's sort of a perception like, oh, that must be kind of a new, young, inexperienced coach. But then all of a sudden you come to Beastera and you watch, Tucker work with a 7-year-old, or you watch James work with a player who is 14, but they took the last 4 years away from the game and they're just coming back to it. And you're like, oh, wow, no, that's still a very good coach, which I think is, it's something unique about Beastera is that from, and something that we talk about too, the adaptability of, I think being a Beastera coach is something that's makes this job so unique is, from 1 30-minute to the next, you could work with somebody who, like you said at the top, wants to be a professional player or just started soccer last week.
Right. And that's been, yeah, I mean, especially coming from college where you're like, okay, I have 3 assistants. Someone's going to take this group. Someone will take this group. Someone will
Yep.
take this group. I planned it ahead of time. I know that we have 27 players, 6 in this group, 11 in this group. To be able to be in a space where you have to adapt, you have to pivot, you have to be able to take a small space and make it a great session.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many different challenges that you get within 1 hour of your 4 hours of coaching that have really tested me in ways and made me grow in ways that maybe I hadn't in 10 years or did differently. Like it's just different type of coaching. And I think that has been, and the observation opportunities that we get to have by watching, others do what they do and do what they do for a living has been a really strong benefit to my growth as a coach in these last couple of years.
Yeah. So to sort of cap us off here, if we extrapolate this idea out a little bit of the eras in the chapters, right? I know we've mentioned a lot of the phase that you're in right now and being able to impact a different kind of subset of athlete, and also get to collaborate with Bistera as well, and such a different chapter than sort of some of the previous ones written. How would you sort of describe this chapter that you're writing right now, or what would you how would you characterize it to someone?
Honestly, I think in a lot of ways it's coming full circle. It's getting back to why I love the game, why I love sport in general. And that stuff that ironically, I think the younger I was, the more maybe not reflective I was, but the more in tune with it I was. Again, going back to why I picked a certain school, going to the environment or the experience I had in South Africa,
Mm-hmm.
The experience I had in Nicaragua, which you didn't really dive into, but was with Soccer Without Borders. It's like really saying, hey, I've loved this because it, one, shaped one of the strongest relationships I've ever had, and that's with my father, and my siblings, and my mom, who was like quintessential soccer mom, manager of all the teams, on the board, all that. So it shaped my family, it's shaped my friends and my community, and to be able to now have more perspective about how the Bistera group and community is, as well as the Special Olympics community, how we can define communities through sport is what I hope this whole chapter and ensuing chapters is reliant on and is defined by. It's really being able to say, like, this sport in general, especially the sport of soccer, we're a little bit biased here, is able to bring about such positive change and such strong life lessons. And I want to get back to that. For me, it's not about watching films, sitting on a bus, getting all the great gear, being on a Jumbotron. It's about being able to say, I remember that light bulb moment where so-and-so learned this, or where this player helped that player learn X, Y, and Z. So to be able to see kind of the fruits of your labor in other people's success.
And does that sort of then, as we pick up the pen to write the future chapters, as you just mentioned there, is that sort of what we're looking to just kind of continue, just building upon this chapter right here? This is where it feels the best for me in this stage. And so as we write future chapters, are there anything else that you look for as like, I really would like to do that in the future and write that chapter?
That's a good question. I think professionally, I think I really like the space I'm in, and to be able to be in a position where I can impact even more people or more of the process behind the programmings that we run would be great. I think personally, I'm continuing to look forward to relationships I can build, family I could build, where you can instill some of or all of those same things, in your own next generation of sorts. And we'll see, what the future will bring in that way. But I feel very fortunate to now be in a space where a lot of my friendships have come back together, or I'm able to devote a little bit more time to building new bridges, to see some of those goals that I had professionally permeate throughout my personal life as well.
Yeah, I love that. Last piece is somebody picks up the book. They've just read the Leigh Howard story with all the chapters, and they're like, I just read it. You've got to read it. Because why?
I think because it's real. I think because it's something that is human, and is someone who's learning how to go through different phases of a career, or different ways to express themselves through something they really, really love. And I think hopefully people can either learn from or relate to the journey that is a career of service, and a career of trying to impact others, and having great successes, but also having great failures, and continuing to push on and hold on to things that matter to them. Whether it's the people, or the sport, or the passion. I think it's not a matter of me changing who I am, which at moments I've thought I needed to, but it's really growing who I am, and building upon some of the amazing pieces of me. And I think that a lot of people could relate to that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time today to share your story. Second of all, as a person who has known you for a couple of years and been lucky enough to call you a friend, and as well someone that can very much empathize and relate with a lot of the things that you've gone through in terms of transition, because I've, dealt with a lot of the same things. I can't tell you how proud I am of you to see the way that you've navigated this over the past couple of years, and to see where you're at now, and to see all the things you're doing. Again, there's just like this immense pride that I have, and appreciation for you and what you've done, and your sort of, I guess, you being a piece of that puzzle for me as well, and being a part of my life. So one, again, like I said, thank you for coming on and sharing the story on this platform for me. But two, like I said, incredibly proud and grateful I get to work with you, and do all the things we get to do together.
Thank you. I know it's the day after Valentine's Day, but you're giving me way too many flowers right now. I appreciate it. It is a pleasure to be part of your journey, be part of the conversations we've had, and trying to figure it all out.
Yep.
Trying to, we both share such a strong love for the sport and for the way it's built us, and figuring out what that means each and every year has been really enlightening for me. So it's not just me who's a piece of your puzzle, it's this other way around as well. So I appreciate it.